Hello everyone. Uh, Thank you for coming in watching this video. I hope it's able to bless you. Uh, Today I'm here to discuss another section of the Old Testament where it speaks of Christ. This is a particularly special one, seeing as how Christ mentioned it on the cross. So hope you find this interesting, and I hope it helps you and blesses you. So, back in the days of Christ, we did not have chapters and verses. So, if you were in the synagogue and the reader wanted you to turn to a specific place, he would tell you the book, and then he would simply say the first verse, and that's where you would begin your reading. So, if I sit here and I start saying the words to a song, kind of brings them into remembrance. Mary had a little lamb and you finish the verse. And that's just me here, you listening to it. If I am going up for execution and I begin to sing the words to a song, you're probably going to start remembering them. And that's exactly what Christ did. Because when he was on the cross, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Now, growing up, it's always been taught and assumed that that meant simply that God could not look upon sin, and so he had to turn his face from Christ. Well, we go back to Psalms chapter 22, which was over 1,000 years before the death of Christ, or before the birth of Christ, then we see that it was clearly written of Christ's crucifixion. And just the fact that it talks about a crucifixion at all is prophetic, because the Jews' way of capital punishment was stoning. Crucifixion wasn't invented until roughly 400 or 450 years before the birth of Christ by the Persians. And of course, as we all know, the Romans took it and ran with it. Christ was not the only person to be crucified. However, his crucifixion was specific, and it was very detailed and very foretold beforehand. So let's look into a little bit of it today in Psalms chapter 22. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to skip around just a little bit to hit some of the high points, but it is still very good. And remember, David was never in any possible chance of being crucified, because, like I said, it wasn't invented until 600 years later. So for him to speak of a crucifixion is very astounding. So, verse 1, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my roaring?" So if we drop down to verse 6, "But I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men, and despise of the people." Christ was despised. All they that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot up the lip. They shake their heads, saying, "He trusted on the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him." That's almost a direct quote from Matthew chapter, 27. And for those of you in the abortion argument back and forth, one trying to say, well, when does life begin? Is it conception? Is it birth? Is it 3 months? Is it 9 months? Verse 9 actually describes that pretty well. Oh, sorry, verse 8. Chapter 9. "Thou art he that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breasts. I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God from my mouth, from my mother's belly. So even while in the womb, he was still called from God. Even while in the womb, God still recognized him. So yes, life is sacred from the moment of conception. Many bulls have encompassed me. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me around. They gape upon me with their mouths as a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. So let's break that down a little bit. I am poured out like water. When Christ was pierced, blood and water ran out from his side. When it was pierced, it went up into his chest and pierced the left ventricle and allowed that to flow out. His heart was melted like wax. His blood and water poured out. Oddly enough, that's not how they would kill someone who was on a cross. If you were on a cross, you were meant to suffer. The longer you suffered, the better the punishment was. But he was crucified before a holy day, so he had to die quickly. Furthermore, when the storm sprung up and the earth shook, it scared the soldiers. A soldier could not leave him on the cross alive. He had to be guarded so he could not be taken down. So what did they do? They killed him as well as the two thieves that he hung between. So typically what you would do is you would break the legs, and it will cause you to suffocate from the pressure put across your chest. But God specifically said not a single one of his bones would be broken. So they actually pierced his side with a spear, although they did break the legs of the other two who were hanging on his sides. So let's continue. My bones are out of joint. So when they would crucify you, they would actually pull both arms out of socket. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws, or I thirst. And thou hast brought me into the dust of death. For dogs encompassed me. He was crucified by Roman soldiers. In their tradition, all Gentiles were dogs. We see this with the woman who came to him begging for a miracle for her daughter, and Christ referred to her as a dog. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. What's interesting is not everyone who was crucified was pierced. A majority of the time, they would just tie you to the cross with bindings. But Christ was specifically pierced in his hands and his feet. If you look back at all the places where he was pierced, it actually lines up with the furniture of the temple. Let's see here. I may tell on my bones. They look and stare at me. So remember, he was beaten to the point where his bones and some of his inner organs were even exposed. They almost killed him. They beat him so badly. They part my garments, and they part my garments among them, and they cast lots upon my vesture. The Roman soldiers divided his clothing amongst each other, but the most choice piece of garment that he had was actually gambled over, casting lots. Sure. But be not thou far from me, O Lord. O my strength, hast thee helped me. And so, the chapter continues on for another 10, 15 verses. But we're not going to go through all of it today. But it over 1,000 years beforehand, and he was describing exact events almost as if he saw them. So, food for thought. It shows that we do have a reliable collection of historical documents, and that's what this is. We think one book, Bible, okay. No, this is a collection of historical documents by, let's see here, it's 64 books by 40 or 42 authors, all stretched out over a course of thousands of years. But the whole story fits together beginning to end as if it were penned by someone who saw the beginning from the end and saw the end from the beginning. God. Well, I've got one video left in this little, I guess you can almost call it a mini-series at this point, where we're going to go all the way back to Genesis and discuss a very early representation of Christ, God, and the Holy Spirit, and God and Christ's coming kingdom. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it has blessed you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.